Hi everyone, I'm Sostine and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to finish making one of my favorite gowns in history, the Doucet bee gown. If you recall, 2 months ago, I started by remaking this absolutely gorgeous in the collection of the Musée des Arts Décoratifs in Paris. I spent around 120 hours and used around 84 yards of silk over 3 months making the skirt. Now I spent the last 2 months working on the blouse, as well as selling a home, buying a home, and moving into said home, as you can see. So suffice to say, work on it has been very sporadic, but I love how it's coming out along with the new home, which I will also show you more of. I need to confess that while I tried to stay as true to the gown as possible, I really couldn't help myself, and I did change up the actual embroidery on the gown. The original had Asian-inspired clouds, but honestly, they were pretty sad and ugly. While I love the overall effect of them, the individual clouds were very meh. So I changed them up to be more accurate to the Asian clouds they were inspired by. My clouds were based on the clouds on a vase in the collection of the Met in New York City, and I really like how they came out. As for the bees, the original bees look more like wasps to me, and I didn't really love their eyes. And I do love me a more chunky bee, so I made them look like the little white fuzzy-tailed bumblebees that are in England. And I want to thank every single one of you who told me about the existence of blue bees. I didn't actually know that much about them. I kind of knew that they existed, but I wasn't really sure, so I'm really grateful for everyone's stories and links, and I really enjoyed that. I am still really happy I went with the yellow bee look, but at the end of the day, it was a really delightful surprise to learn that they exist. Truly, I just love learning constantly, whether it's something new completely or expanding on old knowledge. Currently, I'm using today's sponsor, Skillshare, to expand on video editing. For those of you who haven't heard of it, Skillshare is an online learning platform that makes doing this so much easier. Skillshare has thousands of online classes that you can take in a myriad of different topics, as varied from filming, cooking Indian food, time management, baking, to even sewing with Bernadette Banner. I actually use Skillshare to learn how to use Adobe Premiere to learn how to edit, but I've made it a personal goal to improve my editing process. To do this, I'm using their learning path called Level Up Your Video Editing with Adobe Premiere Pro. Learning paths are curated and in sequential classes you can take one after the other that are designed to help you master a completely new skill. I'm already on the second lesson, Advanced Video Editing with Adobe Premiere Pro by Jordi Vandeput, who actually taught me the basics in his other class, so it's been really nice to catch up with him again. Highly recommended if you're at all interested in learning how to make your own YouTube channel. Best part is, all classes are just a few minutes long, so I can learn just a little bit every single day and slowly and steadily progress. They made it so easy to learn new things and try new hobbies. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Get started today. So back to the skirt and the bee embroidery. As you can see, the bee and the clouds were altered heavily, but honestly, I felt like I had kept enough to the spirit of the gown that it was still recognizable as that gown. And I honestly felt so luxurious and wonderful just wearing it around the house. It's so fluffy, it's honestly a delight. So to finish the skirt, all I had to do was add in the waistband, and that's what I did. But now, back to the bodice. You might recall, the gown originally had 2 bodices, one with sleeves to wear as a day gown, and one which was designed to be a ball gown. Personally, I like the day bodice way more, so I started with that one first. Now, this gown is a 1905 bodice. Sadly, I don't know of any commercial patterns from this time that actually kind of look like this, so I used a slightly earlier one by Truly Victorian. I linked it below, along with all my materials. I started by cutting out the pattern in my size. If you're going to do this, I suggest either starting at your size, or if you're in between, go with the size bigger. If you're not even sure, just go one size bigger. It's always better to start bigger than smaller. Then make a mock-up of it in some strong cotton muslin. Then put on your corset and put the mock-up on, preferably inside out. Have a friend pin it on you, pinching the seams as you go so that the mock-up will follow the curve of your body perfectly. Make sure to line up the sides and the front and the back seam. I often do this on my Beatrice dress form, since this is a dress form made from a 3D scan of my body wearing an 1880s corset. Not quite perfect to the 1905, but close enough that I could start there. Once it was pinned correctly, I put it on and made sure it also fit over my 1905 corset. I then remade the pattern using shapes that I had corrected. This was particularly important so that the shoulders and back would fit me correctly, since honestly, the shoulders and back very rarely fit me correctly. Now, the original bodice is a wrap front, which I think is also Asian inspired. So to make this a wrap front, I extended the front of the bodice by a few inches so it would wrap in the way I wanted it to. I then cut out the neckline to the exact shape I wanted, which in this case was a very plunging V-neck. Once that was settled, I made a new mock-up in cotton twill to test it out. Cotton twill was a little stronger, so this is why I chose that. It worked great. So then I scanned in all the pieces and digitized them on my computer, adding in the clouds and beads to all the pieces on my screen. Once the pattern was all set and the embroidery was determined, it was time to make it in the final fabric. Originally, the skirt that I made was made in sand-washed silk. The original was, of course, silk chiffon, which I hate working with, but it was absolutely glorious and a complete and total nightmare to sew. Luckily, while I was finishing up that skirt, I happened to notice that the ivory double-faced silk satin I used to make some housewives were the exact same shade and sheen, just thicker and way easier to work with. I decided to use that instead for the bodice. I went ahead and drew out the pattern pieces onto the silk satin and then started embroidering this all out on my Babylock Venture. I used silk threads from Tire Silk and metallic threads from Madeira and a tearaway stabilizer from Babylock. All of these are really my favorite tools to work, and I just want to add that Madeira threads are always worth it because it doesn't snag nearly as much as any other brand of silk thread I've used. After around 25 hours of embroidery, all the pieces were done. It was so much easier embroidering on this double-faced silk satin instead of the flimsy and flowy washed silk, so it was way faster. But honestly, the flowiness adds to the magic of the skirt and the stiffness adds to the strength of the bodice, so I think I used the best material for each part, and I don't think I would have changed it looking back. It was miserable embroidering on that silk satin. Once the pieces were embroidered, I started cutting them out. Now, the original gown was made with appliques that were sewn onto a finished gown. In my case, I chose to embroider the pieces before I actually made it up. But I wanted to add some applique bits so that it would cross these seams so it would look like it was applique. For instance, in the center back, I have a large cloud and bee that goes past the midline. To make this look good, I cut the piece out with a seam allowance. I then sewed the back together, except for around the cloud itself. For the cloud portion that went past the midline, I cut it as close to the embroidery as possible using tiny embroidery scissors into the seam allowance all the way to the seam itself. I then flipped the cloud over so that the right side was out. And stitch the cloud down using tiny pinprick stitches by hand that I try to hide into the embroidery as much as possible. I then made the rest of the bodice. For the shoulder seam, I did have to use the applique technique again, but doing this meant that the embroidery would feel much more cohesive, and I really liked the effect. I then added in the sleeves, which were also embroidered. 1900s don't necessarily have a puff sleeve, but the sleeve head is gathered, so I gathered it up using tiny hand stitching and then stitched it all down on my Babylock Soprano. I wanted it to have a little bit more structure. So for the lining, I made it out of that thick cotton twill. Then I pinned the two bodices wrong sides together and then sewed it by hand. Again, trying to hide as many of the stitches into the embroidery itself. As for the bottom of the bodice, I initially tried to turn over the edges so they would be nice and neat, but that satin folded over combined with the twill folded over resulted in 4 very thick layers of fabric at some points, which would be all at the waistline and thus really unflattering, making my waist look bigger. I just unfolded all the layers and just cleanly zigzag stitched the edges to prevent fraying. This will be all covered over by the skirt waistband anyway. I then sewed in hooks and eyes to the front as the closures. Finally, I added in the final touch, the lace at the sleeves. I used the same lace that I used for the bottom of the skirt, but cut it just a little shorter. I really feel like this little bit of lace made the whole bodice work for me. And since the lace is itchy, I did use some cotton tape to cover up the edge of the lace. And the bodice was done. So let's quickly put it on. The beautiful room I'm taking these videos in is actually the ballroom of Stan Mansion. I rented it out for March 2026. Guess I forgot to mention I was also planning a ball. Well, anyways, please follow my Instagram if you want news on that. Now, I do feel like this needs a hat. I had recently approached the incredibly talented Jamie Beads to make my hat for me, but it's not quite done, so I'll show that one off in a few months. I was going to make the ball gown bodice for the transformation gown next, but I'm currently obsessed with romanticy books, in particular this one book by Adeline Grace called Belladonna. So I want to make an 1878 natural form ball gown out of some blood red fabric. I could live my best protagonist life and go to romanticy balls across the country. Do you have a ball gown that you dream of wearing to a ball? Please let me know, because ball gowns are my favorite, in the comments. So I'm putting the bee gown bodice on hold since I'm probably gonna wear that to my ball next year. Please don't forget to subscribe and click the bell since I do make a lot of videos, but I wanted to let you guys know that this will be my last in-depth how-to video for at least about 2-3 months, because I plan on focusing on my other hobbies, including moving in. But please follow along on Instagram as well as my blog, sewstein.com, which I've linked below if you want to see what I want to do there. I will still be posting other get ready with me's and other short videos. I just kind of want to focus on some other things rather than long form videos for a little bit. So I want to say thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Oh, I always get asked what I'm wearing. Currently, I am wearing I do declare skirt, vest, and shirt. And I want to say it does have working pockets in which I could put a pocket watch.